TikTok is probably one of the most interesting platforms that have blossomed over the course of the last decade. It's a platform that has jump-started entire careers and has caused ADHD around the world. It's amazing. Sometimes those careers that spark from TikTok can be really good, and other times it is very bad, and it ends up being very bad for that person's mental health.
You put the fries in the bag. I'm gonna kick your butt!
Will Browning just subscribed on YouTube.
He told me to put the fries in the bag.
In today's video, ladies and gentlemen, I want to go and paint you guys a picture of a TikToker that has gotten into a lot of drama recently. Today we're going to be talking about a person named Roman Hawk. Now, before we talk about all this, there is a few things that I want to preemptively establish about this person, so that way we get all of this out the way. For one, this person is trans. They identify as male, even though there's many videos of them as a girl. I'm going to be showing a lot of clips and images of him both in the past and the present, and the difference in how he looks now and how he looked before are very night and day. So I wanted to mention this now to avoid confusion and leaving y'all wondering if I'm even talking about the same person or I need to go to get glasses or something like that. 2, as shown in the description of his page, he is in fact a corn grower, if you get what I mean. And he posts his corn that he grew in his crop circles on a place called Corn Only, if you get what I mean. And the reason why I'm mentioning this will be very important, so just keep that in the back of your mind. And the last thing is that he's also a furry, like an omega furry, but we'll get to that later. Now, why is this important? Because he's a furry. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's all be honest. I can't even think of anybody who said a nice thing about furries previously.
I knew furries were gods.
Who showed that clip? Who showed that clip? Who showed that freaking clip? So this person, Roman Hawk, is getting canceled on TikTok for the reason of alleged scamming, which is a very serious accusation. And I kind of wanted to start all the way from the very beginning of Roman Hawk's career to kind of get to where we are now and why this alleged scamming by Roman Hawk is happening in the first place. So first, let's take it from the very beginning. Roman Hawk was born in August 9th, 2003. Opening up about his childhood, he had said that he had never met his biological father, as his dad had left before he was even born. Specifically, his dad left when his mom was 9 months pregnant with him.
I've never met my father. He logged out when my mom was like pregnant with me. He showed up when she was 9 months pregnant, about to give birth, took the mattress under her bed, dipped, never saw him again. We've reconnected recently though.
Now because of this, his mom actually had to take the reins. Though unfortunately, this meant that Roman was experiencing a lot of house hopping since his mom couldn't get a stable job. Roman mentions that his early life was shaped by the gym, as one of the jobs his mom ended up keeping was as a gymnastics coach. And this was also around the time where he had met his stepdad. Now, the relationship with his biological dad, at least it was non-existent, at least at this point. But his new stepdad seemed to be a lot worse, as Roman mentions how abusive he was towards him and his mom.
And then met my stepdad. Stepdad was not a good guy. In the beginning, very physically, verbally, emotionally, mentally, financially abusive to my mother. And my mother was also in such a bad place that it was trickling on to me as a child. Then they were having kids, and then I was the step kid, you know, just kind of getting mistreated, pushed to the side.
In the beginning of his school years, an incident had occurred where he actually got pulled to the office full of cops, and this eventually led to a custody battle between his mom and his grandmother, in which his grandmother eventually won, though he mentions that his grandma quote-unquote tricked his mom into giving her custody. Though I won't lie to you guys, I have no idea what this really means. Now from there, he was then pretty much forced to live with his grandmother since she won the custody battle, in which he lived in Pennsylvania for 2 years, then moved back to Alabama where he was originally from. This custody battle lasted a decade where Roman was constantly in custody of his grandparents, even when his mom was improving in all areas of her life. And yeah, he was pretty much not allowed to see her at all.
So with her for 2 years, then back to Alabama. So for like the next decade, I was in my grandparents' custody, and they refused to give my mother back custody even when she finally got herself together. The relationship with my stepdad got better, the kids were growing up. She just still refused.
This is a lot for Roman during this time with him being a kid and all. And while his family life didn't seem great in the slightest, outside that, it seemed that life was a lot better, as he constantly was surrounded by friends in his teen years that would keep him stable during the hard times. Now, Hawk during this time attended Fairhope High School, where he would further delve into his interest in things like playing with and owning animals, and both singing and playing instruments to his heart's content. I assume this would also be where he would focus on things like his art, which is really good even back then, might I add. Now, we don't have a lot of information about Roman during this point in his life, but a former friend of his, whose brother was also good friends with his ex, that ex being named Dakota, provided a little bit of insight into how he was. Now, they first mentioned how Roman was a kind of supportive friend when they used to know him, though in retrospect did have some red flags about him, and recalled an instance where he started a rumor about Dakota where he said that they were both abusive and a cheater, though at the time Roman didn't provide any evidence of any of that happening, which honestly, even for a high schooler, that is a crazy thing to say about somebody. They also mentioned a very interesting thing about Roman, and that was his alleged phases. They've always been shifting identities. They went through different phases like crazy goth phase, singer phase, and even a strong makeup phase where he'd do super cool makeup looks. It was like every few months they'd wipe the slate clean and start over. One minute they were trying to get famous for acoustic covers on Instagram, the next they were doing a full-time reptile keeper, and then suddenly they were a full-time furry on TikTok. And this would show into Roman's next venture, his TikTok arc. Now, around this time was when Hawk started gaining attention on TikTok, posting videos and pictures revolving around his pets. Roman seemed to be someone who was always into pets and animals his whole life, but through old posts, Roman reveals that his affinity has always been with reptiles, and we can see that with a lot of the pets he's owned previously. When we specifically talk about pets that Roman's owned, while he has owned plenty of animals throughout his life, one of the first pets he had owned to himself was a bearded dragon he had named Margot. Now, Margot herself is the name of Roman's lizard. Margot was born on January 28th, 2018 in Navarre, Florida, and according to Hawk, was his first real responsibility, as taking care of a pet is a lot of work, especially if said pet is as exotic as a bearded dragon. It's not every day you see one of those. The former friend in the subreddit also mentions how Roman would always bring Margot to school. However, this wasn't entirely uncommon like how it would normally, because apparently everyone from southern Alabama just brings weird animals to school, I guess. They mentioned how Margot would usually perch herself on someone else's arm, and said that Roman at some point even put Margot in a car and rode said vehicle with Margot completely unsecured. Man, what a Chad. What a genius. 1000 IQ play. Now, Hawk started his journey on TikTok at just 17 years old, and he got popular around 2020 with a video called Her Name is Margot, which is probably the video that you guys know him from the most, where basically he's making a beat talking about how people mispronounce his lizards.
Excuse me, her name is Margot. Now Marco or Mango was Fargo. Someone said Wells Fargo. Her name is Margot.
Now, Roman provides some more context as to the production of the TikTok, saying that it was heavily based on a trend at the time, and that the goal was for some attention.
Were you trying to be viral, or was that just kind of you being silly?
So there's an entire misunderstanding actually to that entire video. It started with a user called Gracie Just Gracie, and she started with, "Excuse me, my name is Gracie, not Stacy or Tracy or Lacey, Gracie Just Gracie." And then I saw two other people make their own versions, and then I realized, oh, this is probably going to be a trend. I would like to hop on this. So first take ever, I did "Excuse me, her name is Margot, not Marco, Mango, Wells Fargo," and then I just uploaded it. I was just like, okay, this is a trend. I was a very small account at the time. I had my first viral video just in November of that year, of the last year, so 2019. So very small account. I was like, trend, hopped on it, blew up overnight, and then it all just started going boop 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 from there.
Now, it probably wasn't as much attention as he was eventually going to get, because going back to the TikTok itself, Her Name is Margot had gotten a shitload of views over a short period of time, and basically went so viral. People were then doing things like taking the audio and doing different parodies and different animations as well. Roman basically started his own trend, pretty much. Roman mentions how this initial boost in attention was a lot for him to adjust to.
What were the feelings that you got when you first blew up with that video?
So at first, the first time that's ever happened to someone, you're a little scared because you see, oh, 10,000 views. Oh, 100,000 views. Oh my God, my first million views. And then you're realizing more and more people are seeing it. And then the more and more followers that come in, it starts to weigh on you that you have to start performing.
Now, this wasn't all butterflies and rainbows, because while on the surface, one would assume the success of this would make anyone ecstatic. I mean, you're getting constant praise and you're making a name for yourself. Roman was a bit different about his successful transition into content, at least from what he claims, because it seems like there was another person that was orchestrating this whole thing, and I'll let him explain it.
It starts to weigh on you that you have to start performing. In a sense, it's different for everyone, but for me, I was living with my grandmother. I had for like the last 10 years, and she was sort of my manager. She was the one trying to get me successful.
Okay.
So really the whole internet thing was more so her idea. I started it as a joke, but as soon as that video blew up, she's like, "You've got followers, you got people looking at you now. We're going to turn this into profit." And I was like, okay.
To give context as to the reason why his grandmother was so obsessed with wanting Roman to become a TikTok star was because previously he had actually auditioned for the popular TV show American Idol. You know, the show that has that intro that goes, "Ah!" This is also very likely tied to that singing phase that the former friend brought up as well, as Roman not only was a good singer, but was even shown to previously participate in events like Fairhope's talent show in 2018, where he completely won. And I will say, this kind of makes me question Roman's very cynical view of his grandma's management, because at least to me, with the context of his phases that he had, it more seemed like the grandma was more passionate and wanted Roman to succeed in whatever quote-unquote phase he was in at the time. Not because of her desires necessarily, but because Roman was heavily invested in it. This could also be a mixture of both, but that may just be me overstepping, but I do still think it's some interesting food for thought. And while he did pass the audition and made it through, it sadly didn't go anywhere due to them overcasting. And it's not really a surprise, because he definitely has the pipes to pass for sure.
I'm on my knees when I'm begging, 'cause I don't wanna lose you. Yeah. Ra-ta-ta-ta.
Now, his grandma's reaction, at least from what Roman interpreted it as, was that she labeled this event as his biggest failure. He then mentions how, due to his recent success on TikTok and seeing the money rolling in, his grandmother started acting as a manager of sorts.
Interesting.
So then this happened, and she's like, now this is going to be your next thing. So then that pressure from one failure, the next failure, and now this, trying to make it work.
When you say that you're getting cut because there was too much bloat, I guess, on the American Idol, was a failure, was that her words, or was that your interpretation of what she had said?
My interpretation. I did songs that, worked well with my voice, worked well with my character and me. Like one of them was the fucking "Ooby Doo, I wanna be like you," ooh, from Jungle Book on ukulele, and they loved it. That's what sold them. She hated that. She was like, "No, you're not gonna make it because of this." But I did.
Basically, the grandmother saw this as another opportunity to get Roman famous, because at the time, TikTok was all the rage. So with the help of his grandmother, for better or for worse, Roman would jumpstart his career into content creation on TikTok, in which, from what I see, the growth was very quick, as by February 12, 2020, Hawk had reached a milestone of 1 million followers on TikTok. Then, only a few months later, he reached 4 million followers, and at his peak, he had a massive 5.5 million followers. That really is a massive jump. And you know what else is massive? Through this, Roman Hawk would be mostly known for his lizard, Margot. And Margot would pretty much be the star of the show, with her being in most of his TikToks.
You can... Sir!
What?
What are you doing?
Hey, good night. Daggum snake that stuck his head out of that hollow.
Did you get it?
No.
And this would pretty much be the nature of all of his TikToks at this point in time. Just a bunch of wholesome TikToks with a lizard. And people would catch on to this and basically follow for wholesome adventures with his lizard, Margot. And because of this, Margot was one of the main reasons that a lot of people followed him, which was this yellowish one that I'm showing on screen. But Hawk also had a lesser known one named Guppy, which is the more grayish one. But Margot's the one that's most important right now. Her life was filled with love, bugs, and adventure. She never knew the amount of love she had from strangers on the internet. From graduating to moving from Alabama to New York City to seeing brothers and sisters, brand deals, custom art and shoes, she was the spotlight and she knew it. She is beautiful inside and out. Now, at the time, people had made comments talking about him only being popular because of Margot, and Hey man, if hairy nigga bum sex has a problem with you, you better pack it up, buddy. It's over. Now Hawk, probably thinking at the time that he wanted people to more follow him for him and wanted to develop that relationship, went with the, let's say, very extreme option of growing corn in his yard. And like, a lot of corn in his yard. We're gonna get into specifics a little later, but just know that he was making so much money posting all of his corn content on corn only that he made it his full-time job instead of making TikToks. Now, there were people that were criticizing him for this, saying that promoting his corn growing on TikTok when he initially had kids watching his content that he made more wholesome was very inappropriate. And honestly, I think that's a fair critique. He would use said money to do things like collect taxidermy, which, if you didn't know, is basically the preservation of a dead animal's body, and also dipping money into buying expensive ass fursuits for his furry hobby. Also, he mentions that he's been into the furry lifestyle since he was 11 years old due to his love of animals. Just less we talk about that, the better. Anyways, both of these things are very expensive hobbies to do, but Mr. Hawk could do it, right? Now, as someone who, as we're about to talk about, entered a complete shit show of a situation a little later, up until this point in the story, he actually didn't enter too much controversy. Now, there was some more serious allegations bubbling concerning Margot herself, which we're gonna dive deep into later, so don't worry, it is what it is. However, the grace period ended when Roman released a somewhat controversial TikTok where he basically crashed out over how hard it is growing corn and being a content creator online.
Let's have a real talk. Because content creators are fucking people.
Wait, content creators are fucking people? Man, I hope there's consent there. Now, just to be clear, this is a 3-minute long crash out session of Roman talking about like a bunch of things. So to summarize, he starts off by talking about how he never wanted to blow up from the original TikTok about Margot, and ever since then, he feels like him having to do stuff like marketing and PR is mentally taxing on top of the various forms of harassment that he was receiving, specifically mentioning doxing and death threats. He also briefly mentions how exploitative his grandma was, according to him, mostly in the ways that we've gone over already. And then there's this.
I don't understand where we're going wrong with the actual fucking issues in the world with children dying, the absolute genocide in Gaza, the absolute economy crisis in this world that I can't even have a 9-to-5 job to pay for a decent apartment, that I have to exploit my body online to make my fucking bills. And just because I incorporate my little hobby in there to make some extra cash, I'm disgusting and I deserve to die.
You're literally crying about being bullied for being a furry. Maybe you should take your own advice. Unless you think that getting harassed for being a furry is on the same level as Gaza. Also, get a fucking job or something to pay your bills. You don't have to exploit your body. Now, one other line that I found interesting was when he mentioned being quote unquote put on this pedestal. Now, while he does then follow it up by saying it's millions of people that are having this expectation about him, I think here he's more referring to his grandmother and how she seems, at least according to Roman, to have this very high expectation of him being a star. And this is him sort of projecting that feeling of pressure to his audience, I guess, like as a way to communicate it. Other than that though, that's pretty much the TikTok. Now overall, what is my general opinion about it? Do I think that he's lying here? No, not really. I think this is like his genuine thoughts about like everything that was going on. I think the feelings here were genuine, but I think the video itself, it's very, very performative. I can see why people were making fun of him for this. With all the money he was making on top of all the personal family issues he was having with his grandmother at the time due to all this happening, at the end of May 2021, he made the decision to move to New York City to basically start a new life living independently.
Now you're in New York!
And had obviously took his pets as well, including his famed lizard, Margot.
That was quit my job, the one that I had over the summer because I was going back into school. 18, noticed people, were like, my body, whatever the heck. Started that, made a good, decent chunk of money, bought my first car with the first chunk of money, and I just kept saving all that money I had. And I was dating this one guy at the time, not together, broke up like 3 years ago. I was dating this guy at the time in New York, and I saved up all that money I made to go move up there with him and his family, finally start my adult life.
Also, keep in mind, this was only 3 days after graduating high school. 3 days! With that, Roman continued on with posting videos of him and Margot while also growing plenty of corn in his yard as well. And while some of the criticisms levied towards him stuck, he pretty much went controversy free for the most part. Well, until he didn't. So now that we've established all that, let's switch gears and talk a bit more into her little butt buddy there, Margot. Margot's health had been a concern for people for a while now, which we won't entirely get into yet. However, visibly troubling signs did show that Margot had something wrong with her. For one, there was her tail, which shown in pictures and videos, seemed to be becoming a lot darker of a color, specifically at the tip of it. And also around this time was when her laying eggs seemed to have some concern as well, as a post from Margot in November 2021 would show that Margot was having a very hard time laying eggs, in which Roman would label it as being a rough time. Now, there's an interesting fact about Margot that you may have noticed in some of his more recent TikToks, which you might not be surprised after seeing the concerning signs earlier, but it's her lack of tail. And you're probably curious as to why does Margot not have a tail anymore? This is what other people who were still following Roman at the time are thinking. Hawk would talk about what happened to it. He would do this in a TikTok, which I'm gonna summarize for the most part since the video is like 2 minutes long and I would rather just kind of share the clip notes of it, of the most important things. Basically, how the story started, according to Hawk, is that Margot had started laying a lot of eggs, and Hawk noticed that one of them was kind of stinky, which is usually a sign that something is wrong. Now, then he relates back to a story about how Margot at one point accidentally ate one of his jewelries that fell on the floor at the time. Roman would then link these two instances together and have her taken to the vet, in which she then had to undergo multiple surgeries.
One day she was free roaming and she was walking around and I heard a crunch. I looked down and a piece of my jewelry, like one of my very small earrings and at the time a nose stud of mine, had fallen onto the floor off my desk and she ate them, very small. I immediately took her to the emergency vet to where they x-rayed her and said they were going to pass normally and they did not need to do surgery, but her uterus was septic.
So he said he brought up the tip of her tail being dark and stiff, and when he mentioned that to the vet, he claims that they said that it was a correlation between the stiff tail in tandem with her septic uterus. Now the next day, it was revealed that she had a hysterectomy, which is basically like a surgery to remove her uterus, and had her entire tail amputated as well, leaving her with half of her tail left, basically, a little nub. Now this story would be heavily scrutinized for a lot of different reasons that we're gonna get into later, so don't worry. I understand there's some things that don't make any sense. Now, he claimed that Margot was healthy and safe from here, but sadly, this wouldn't continue to be the case. And on June 20th, 2025 was the day where the drama would ensue, all starting with the unfortunate passing of Margot, in which Hawk updated people about it on his page. So he says, with the heaviest heart, Margot passed peacefully in her sleep this morning. She survived 2 major surgeries and pushed through like the beast she was. Margot, I have had you since I was 16 years old. You've watched me grow, graduate, came to school with me, traveled across the country with me, and came just about everywhere I was. You were my first responsibility, and I made sure I did a damn good job keeping you with me. You stayed patient through my trial and error, and you did so well when it came to your weight loss journey, because stupid child me didn't know how much or how little to feed you. You never bit anyone, you were the kindest reptile I have ever been around, and I thank you for everything you did for me. I love you, Margot, and I will never forget you or any of our memories together. Your Papa, Roman Hawk. Now, in another post, he also goes into more detail about how he figured out that she died, in which he mentions that when he woke up to take a photo of her, Margot didn't look up at him like she would usually do. That's kind of when her body went stiff and that he realized that she was dead. Now, this was all super sudden to both him and fans of Margot, and you're probably wondering what the cause of death was. And the answer to that, according to Hawk, due to people asking about it, was Margot having this thing called GNT, which is basically a cancer where she had tumors that started in her stomach and spread to other areas of her body. Apparently by the time that they figured out, it was too late. I just want to say rest in peace to that beautiful lizard. It sucks that this has to kind of be talked about in order for me to kind of give a brand of events, but hey, rest in peace to Margot. Now, the problem comes after the death of the lizard when Hawk created a GoFundMe. Hawk published this a day later, which ran through the reasons why he was making it in the first place. The first part mostly gives a brief synopsis of pretty much everything that I've kind of talked about so far, like his life up to this point and Margot passing away. But the other part is where it gets really interesting, specifically on the third paragraph. As a taxidermy collector, I have chosen to have her skeleton articulated in the pose of one of her photos I have shown and have the rest of her cremated into an urn. Unfortunately, I do not have the funds to even get her cremated currently, so I could use all the support I could get in this devastating time. She will have a beautiful memorial shelf in my home along with her statue and other art pieces from fans across the globe. Now, he had then announced that he was selling a lot of his taxidermy and fossils that he had bought previously because he was desperate to pay rent. Also, and this is the most important thing about the GoFundMe, is that he was asking for $4,000 for taxidermizing Margot. I don't even know if that's a word, but I don't care. And if you are curious, he ended up raising a little over 3K at its peak, so he did almost make the goal, but there's a couple issues here that a lot of people picked up on. Now, this kind of gets us into crowdfunding and ethics of crowdfunding, if that makes any sense. Very recently, we've seen a lot of creators that have done crowdfunds, which means going on a certain site, raising money for a specific cause, whether that be, for example, doing a charity service, or even crowdfunding a dream that someone has, like making a game or something like that, because it's very expensive to put money into that. And recently, we've seen that a lot of the times things either fall through, people aren't transparent with their audience, which I don't understand why not, because people are trusting you to handle their money with care, and I feel like updating your audience in any way that you can is the least that you could do, because people have so graciously gave you their money in order for you to do something, especially if it's something like accomplishing your dreams, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there are crowdfunds that are good. For example, think like Jacksepticeye's Thankmas charity thing that he does every year, but obviously there are going to be some bad eggs. So basically, whenever someone comes out with kind of a crowdfunding goal or something along those lines, a lot of people question if that's actually going to happen, or if the money is actually going there, or if it's going somewhere else. And this is kind of when we get into people questioning Roman Hawk's crowdfunding for Margot's taxidermy. So through all the 15 minutes I did for this video, I'm now going to explain the multiple things wrong with this fundraiser that he tried to do and why people were suspicious of this from the jump, and basically ended up thinking that this entire thing was a scam. Now, the core of why people think this is a scam mostly has to do with the price. Like I said before, it's $4,000, right? Now, why is this a red flag in itself exactly? Well, because from everything that I've seen and seeing experts talk about it, in no world does in no world does Roman Hawk need $4,000 to taxidermize. What is the word? Is it taxidermizing? Taxes? Phantom Tax Marco. On TikTok, there was a professional taxidermist named Sky Has Died who had commented on the GoFundMe page saying that there is no taxidermist that would charge that much on commissions.
Margot the Bearded Dragon. I am an animal cremation specialist as well as a taxidermist that specializes in bone harvesting and pet memorials. So unsurprisingly, I have been asked my opinion on this situation. Y'all are being scammed. Do not donate to that GoFundMe, because there is no world where cremating a bearded dragon is $4,000. The company that I work for, we would charge under $300 for a complete private package for the cremation of a bearded dragon. So I don't know where $4,000 is coming from. And yes, that includes a custom urn. And as a taxidermist, yes, full body skeletal articulation is expensive, especially for a lizard, but $4,000. No, don't donate to that GoFundMe. Plus that lizard was neglected to the point that it died. Bearded dragons have a lifespan of like 15 to 20 years, I'm pretty sure. And if I am correct, Margot was 7. So I don't know what the hell that 4,000 number came from, but I'm 80% sure that they're going to spend it on a fursuit, because we all know those are expensive. Yes, animal cremation is expensive. Yes, taxidermy is expensive, but not that expensive. Holy crap.
Now, since she had commented on this, other people had tried to rationalize and make sense of it, saying that maybe it was the fact that his lizard had cancer or something, and that's why the price was so expensive. But no, according to Sky, an animal dying from cancer doesn't change the cremation price at all, and it's only based on the size of the animal. And considering that Margot is pretty small, well, not for a bearded lizard, which we'll get into, but just in general, the bearded dragon getting cremated wouldn't cost that much. I even saw a comment that someone said that it took $2K to cremate their horse. Their horse! It's a horse! Now, another thing that didn't make much sense in the fundraiser, at least to me and other people that seemed to question it as well, was that not only did Hawk want Margot taxidermied, but also cremated, which is like, how the hell does that work exactly? I don't know. Because from what I understand, cremation is like burning the body into ashes and storing it in like an urn so you can keep the remains and whatnot. Wouldn't that be kind of counterintuitive to stuffing the body like he said? I wish that he would have gone into more detail in that in the original GoFundMe. When I saw some other people who were confused as well, like this Mother Coconuts person who said he also has said he wanted Margot cremated and taxidermied. Like, I'm no expert, but how would that work? I felt so seen and so heard, dog. It was actually so great. Anyways, going back to the confusing ass fundraiser, someone had asked this to the taxidermy expert, and then in response to this comment, the taxidermy expert actually had elaborated saying this.
This is definitely the most asked question in my comment section right now. The answer is that it would not work. Soft tissue, like fat and muscle and tendons and skin, doesn't survive the cremation process. Ashes are only made up of skeletal remains. And I don't want to make another video about this because it's stupid, so while I'm here I'll just clear some things up. For people that are like, he doesn't want him cremated, he wants him taxidermied. And second of all, it's not as much as he's claiming it would be. If you're being charged over like $600 for a bearded dragon articulated skeleton, find somebody else because that price is egregious. Even $600 is really up there.
And then she goes on to reinforce that the numbers don't make any sense about how she needed that much money for the cremation and taxidermy of a bearded dragon. And you would think Roman Hawk would know this considering, you know, the nigga collects taxidermy as a hobby. I saw a lot of rumblings about maybe he's getting scammed, but the fact that he would be getting scammed about the price of getting Margot taxidermy or something like that makes no sense to me. And just for the hell of it, because I was just curious, I went ahead and added about 2 minutes to my normal 15 minutes of research that I do, and I also found this as well. So this is kind of an animal family advanced pet preservation. This is like a taxidermy site that I found while doing, just because I was curious. Whenever people call us desiring information about preserving their pets, the price will come up early in the conversation. Only a very small part of what you need to consider before making your decision. If you scroll down for a full freeze-dry preservation, here you can see bearded dragon right here. It says time 4 to 6 months, and it says this is with shipping included $850. Taxidermy of a bearded dragon, even with shipping included, wasn't even $1,000, but then this person is asking for $4,000. So it's kind of like, where is the money going to? Now, this is where others had found a post he made on his Facebook account about Margot passing away, where he mentioned something that is weirdly left out of the GoFundMe. So he says, as many of you know, I had Margot since I was 16 years old, and she went through everything and everywhere with me. This past Friday, June 20th, Margot passed away. This has taken a huge toll on me since she was the reason I even got to jumpstart to anything I have now. I owe everything to her. I am in the process of now moving home, but need a little extra help with funds, sadly. I have a GoFundMe open for Margot's memorial, and any extra donations go to my move. Now, in my personal opinion, while the clear up was there in the paragraph about prioritizing the money to go to Margot and then any extra funds would go to him, I'm still kind of confused on why leave this out of the fundraiser, because I feel like this is important information to have, right? A lot of people were very suspicious about why was he not being transparent about that and mention all of this stuff kind of in the fundraiser. Now, whether paying rent due to a situation like this is a valid reason to make a GoFundMe, I'll kind of leave that up for you guys to decide. But once again, if you do say yes, it was kind of one of those questions where it's like, why not include that in the GoFundMe? But this is not all, ladies and gentlemen. This is not all whatsoever. And here is where we're going to unpack a little more specifically about Roman's money issues and struggling for him to pay money, and by his own admission, even struggling to pay for the cremation of Margot. And what's a better place to do that than with his successful full-time gig as a corn grower? Now, I didn't get into this too much when I was explaining it, but now we're going to be doing a little bit of pocket watching. I'm not going to lie, okay? I'm sorry in advance, but yes, we're going to do some pocket watching. Now, according to various posts on TikTok that have said similar things, Roman was consistently the top 1% of all the corn growing sites that he was on for at the very least a year. And I can actually show that this is definitely the case, at least at one point, because on his Snapchat, which thankfully he didn't delete yet, he has it in his bio saying that this is the case. Now, what this exactly means is that he would have to have a consistent revenue stream in order to be at that level, at least from my understanding. So little to say, he was making a lot of money on his corn only debut. By the way, you know, just because if I have to see this, you have to see it. The account is named Muzzle Mutt. I have no idea why they would have such an inappropriate name growing corn in his yard, but you know, it is what it is, I guess. If you go on his Twitter account and look at his site, I shit you not, this is what I'll say, and I'm just gonna read this. I'm just gonna read it. Thank you to Intimately Global for such a detailed replica of my needy pussy. I want to see y'all pump me full of both holes. I can't wait to get one of my own to give a full review on how amazing I feel. Also, on top of that, which is another thing that got people suspicious, is that Roman not too long ago was showing posts that like blatantly contradict him, saying that he quote unquote needs help with funds.
As I've said, money is tight, but for some reason people want to tell me I'm financially fine. Why would I ask for help if I'm fine? Why would I do that? If I was fine and was able to do any of this on my own, I wouldn't have posted anything. But instead, you want to come to the internet and say I'm begging for money and trying to profit off of my...
You know, it's a little ironic coming from someone who is posting on their Twitter, my own home, just me. I can walk around, film in every room. I can focus on work, second job, extra income. Oh my god, life is about to get good.
Also, before anyone is like, well, this was probably a long time ago, I went and unfortunately looked at his corn growing Twitter account. But this post that he made was made on July 2nd, days after he posted his fundraiser that he implied he was struggling with money. I would just like to take a quick intermission and ask you guys to please like the video, guys. Please like the video, please. I beg of you. If you please. Also, keep in mind, not only was he selling a mold of his to people and talking about how he was free and could have extra income, which honestly is kind of sus, because I hope he doesn't mean the GoFundMe page in this. I can definitely see people taking that as meaning the GoFundMe if they know about the GoFundMe in the first place. Now, on top of all of that, by the words of Roman himself, he earned well over $1 million in 2023 alone when he was flexing on someone that was saying he makes no money. And in 2022, according to Roman, he was making over $1 million off of corn only. And in 2021, previous to those 2 years, he was talking about how he was making over $50K a month off the corn growing alone, which is an insane amount of money. Someone had also pointed out in a post that the molds of his genitals he sold at 169 people bought in that week alone. And after seeing that they were $125 a pop, when you do the general calculations and obviously account for the 20% cut on the profits, which Roman admits in a response to someone talking about it was the cut that the website was getting for the molds, that is still more than enough to pay his bills and have enough for whatever he wanted to do with Margot's corpse. The only way Roman not having enough money makes sense here would be if the website Roman is using takes like over 80% of the price exclusively for him. But once again, you have to have extreme copium to think this. Also, this leads us into his hobbies, because that was also a question. Why not sell off those fucking fursuits and taxidermy this dude was collecting the whole time? I just want to be clear, he was already doing that because he needed to pay rent. But in that case, I ask kind of like, why stay in that house? Why not downsize at that point? I just feel like it's really stupid to do that, but I digress. The fursuits are especially egregious to me because one, this nigga apparently had like 30 fursuits. 30! What, did you need one fursuit for each day of the month or something? Like, what are we doing? Keep in mind, fursuits are notoriously very expensive, and selling one of those things off probably costs like $4,000 in itself. So once again, why the GoFundMe? Now, I do want to be fair here. He does have a store page where he is selling a couple of his fursuits, and according to other people, he had already sold 26 of them. I don't know when he did this, but I'm pretty positive that unless he's living in the fucking New York equivalent of Bel Air, even if he sold them at half the price or something, surely you wouldn't have to ask other people for money and would have enough to pay for rent and whatnot. Now, I've seen some people defending him, saying that he was being stupid with his money, but like, this is going to be kind of an assumption for me. me. You're like, I'm sorry, you need a caretaker if you're telling me he's blowing through that much money like that. Like, is he buying like gold fursuit that has jetpacks attached to them? I don't understand. All of these factors in its totality kind of led people to question the validity of this GoFundMe or if it's a scam. So when all of this inevitably came out, it was safe to say Roman was not taking it very well, and he started out to prove his innocence by wishing death threats upon people. Actual most sane furry interaction?
When he did start to become a furry and first started posting on OF, he did get a lot of death threats. And when Margot died, that just escalated even more. And don't get me fucked up, I don't believe death threats are good. Either way, I don't think they're good. But then wishing on the people who are viewing your videos that their loved ones die and that they don't get time to mourn their deaths is evil. That is evil. Why would you want to spread that energy back around? Why? You know how it feels to get death threats, so why would you want to then give death threats to the people viewing your videos?
Look, I get it and I can sympathize here. It is a vulnerable time and you're feeling emotional. But at that point, you really have to log off, because matching someone's energy like that is basically falling right into their hands and you're doing exactly what they want you to do. Also, it's just very unhinged and weird to just publicly put death threats on people. Like, that's wild. After people were bringing this up, Roman's next response after wishing death upon random people was to wear a furry head, pitch down the voice for whatever reason, and completely crash out on TikTok. And you can tell he's crashing out here because he literally starts off the video mentioning that he hasn't showered in a few days because he hasn't been in the right headspace. Man. Actual cleanest furry. No, but seriously, I do have to ask this. Why does he think doing this is gonna have people take him seriously, even if he may have some good points in this video? This just seems so performative, which, as you can tell, seems to be kind of a little pattern that Roman likes to do. And it's very similar to the last crash out he had when talking about growing corn in his yard. Once again, the genuine feelings are there, but the video itself seems performative. Now, Roman would actually provide more context to this crash out. As one could speculate, he was in a very bad headspace at the time, and this caused him to make the bad decision of doing that. And then shortly after uploading the TikTok, he then took it down because he realized how ridiculous it looked. Here, he pretty much rambles on and attempts to respond to people by saying that his fundraiser is a scam without really going into detail about anything. Like, for example, this is his response to people that were looking into his past with money and now figuring out how much money he was making.
And for all the other fucking people, the saying like the 4K, do you not know that within the Cropsy autopsy, the payment for the shipping her body overnight across the fucking country, the payment for the services, the payment for the urn, the payment to ship back, all of that fucking adds up. Saying I'm using this 4K to buy a new fursuit, why the fuck? I'm moving. I'm in the middle of moving. I have so much other things to think about than a stupid fucking costume. I'm wearing this because I look like shit. I haven't had a single fucking moment to grieve. I haven't had a single fucking moment to process anything going on. You're using screenshots and shit from 5 years ago when I didn't know proper husbandry, and you're just like, oh, that's still going. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. All of you deserve to rot. All of you.
And God forbid people look into what they're putting their money into. Oh my god, the horror. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this one. One, he deleted the TikTok very shortly after. I'm not going to use this as his feelings now about the whole situation. And also, he posted a much less unhinged response later on. But one thing that he said that was very interesting was actually this.
Margot was obese when she was young. As I got older, she was put on a diet treatment, lost all that weight but still had a little bit more. You want to know why? Because her uterus went septic. She was refusing to lay some eggs, and I had to take her to the vet. She had to get her uterus removed and half of her tail amputated, which cost me over $6 grand to save her fucking life.
Now, if you guys remember the story previously about how Margot ended up losing her tail, there's something here that completely contradicted what Roman said before. And that was him saying that Margot wasn't laying eggs, when in the other story, he said the complete opposite.
When I was living in Long Island, Margot randomly started laying a lot of eggs, which I thought was weird because I did have a male at the time, and I think it was just the hormones from the male.
And this wasn't the only thing that was contradictory about the story of how Margot got her tail amputated. So remember the whole thing about how Roman said that Margot needed to go to the vet because her quote-unquote uterus went septic? Once again, he says this not only back then, but also now. Now, from what I understand, bearded dragons don't have uteruses, like, at all. They do have oviducts so that they're able to lay eggs. So Margot having a uterus doesn't make any sense here, because even if you think about it logically, and keep in mind, I may not be the best at explaining this, but I'm pretty sure if she did have a uterus, she would be storing the egg there instead of laying the egg, and she would go through the process that, like, what humans and other mammals would go to. Reptiles don't have uteruses, and it would be very weird for a vet to tell him that they do. So what's up with that? While this was being talked by people, Roman had noticed this and provided a statement, attempting to address it. Since people are claiming I'm lying about Margot's uterus, saying I said she never had one so she couldn't have issues with it, are y'all dense? She didn't have one because it was surgically removed so it would kill her. Now, I think it's interesting that he's talking about people being dense, but he's the only dense one here, because no one was arguing that he was lying about Margot's surgery. They were saying that lizards in general do not have uteruses, period. Then in a recent interview he did with Papa Gut, his new excuse was going from that to saying that saying the word uterus was easier.
But they assured me, they said she was going to pass these normally. It's not going to obstruct anything. But in the x-ray, they noticed, so bearded dragons do not have uterus. It's an oviduct. But uterus is, that's, people get mad about that term. Bearded dragons don't have
I was
uterus.
going to ask you about that because people had said that. I'm assuming it was just easier to say uterus.
Yeah.
It
was just easier to say, and people got mad at me about that.
Now, maybe I would buy this if he was a brand new lizard owner and he had just gotten Margot recently, but he's owned many reptiles for a large part of his life. So I really think that having the proper terminology, especially if you're being accused of being a terrible lizard owner, is important to make you look more competent. And then the other thing I have to ask is, why the strange double down in the other post if the initial reason was that it was quote unquote easier to say? Once again, it just makes no sense. There was these weird inconsistencies with this story of how exactly she got her tail amputated, and a lot of people had thought this was a way for Roman to, whether consciously or subconsciously, make excuses for her alleged poor care of Margot, and people in general have said quite a lot that he's not a great pet owner. This was something that was covered previously before, but I didn't go into a ton of detail, which we will now go into. The whole claim of Roman not being a good pet owner had apparently been around for a while now. From what I saw, people were saying that this has been a talking point about Roman since around the COVID period, and obviously the reason why it flared up again is due to Margot's unfortunate passing. Now, before anyone says anything, I found that even Roman has said this about himself at one point. He also hinted towards it in the original post in the GoFundMe, saying that he didn't take good care of Margot. So, while cryptic, he has acknowledged this before, and maybe some bad habits had carried over, causing the untimely death of Margot. People who even owned bearded dragons themselves called him out over this and have noticed the harmful bad habits.
Roman Hawk is a bad pet owner, and here's why. So in his latest video, he makes two claims. He claims that A, Margot doesn't like to climb, and B, her enclosure was set up the way it was for her safety. Both of those are blatantly untrue. For starters, you wouldn't know if she likes to climb. It is in their nature that they are climbing animals because they are from the desert, and there's a lot of rock formations in which bearded dragons live. So it is in her nature to enjoy climbing. The thing is, the way you set up that enclosure, like a dollhouse, does not promote climbing. You wouldn't know that she likes to climb because you've never given her the opportunity to. So that's bullshit.
Now, this was in response to the first crash out where Roman had said that Margot doesn't like to climb but just bask in the sun and that's it. Another thing he said, which this owner also called out, was about Margot's tank, which Roman in the video said was good for her actually. In reality though, it was the exact opposite. And once again, I'll let the actual expert talk about it in their own words.
You set it up for her safety. Dollhouse enclosures are not for anyone's safety. They are not for the reptile's safety. They are incredibly harmful. On top of that, I'm presuming that you mean you set it up for her safety after surgery. This is even worse, actually. Anyway, if you actually set it up for her safety with the intent of sterility post-surgery, you wouldn't have a couch in the foam in there. Both of those harbor so much bacteria. It is insane. Any reptile forum, if you do a basic Google search, it will tell you, do not put cloth things in enclosures because they harbor so much bacteria and it will most likely get your animal sick.
Roman has also mentioned that the tank wasn't good for Margot, and even said that he had actually made plans to replace the tank. Whether or not you want to believe him or not, it's up to you, but this is what he claims. They had also mentioned that the issue with Margot's enclosure was that it really didn't promote any exercise at all, which a lot of people also noticed about Margot. She's very overweight.
This is what a normal bearded dragon looks like. And this is what Roman Hawk's bearded dragon looked like when it died. I mean, the negligence is insane. I don't know why this isn't a crime. This bearded dragon didn't die of natural causes. I used to own a bearded dragon, and this is what it looked like. This was hers. This bearded dragon died because it was slowly killed by neglect disguised as love. This was overfeeding like it was a toy. Look at the gut on this thing. It should not have a fat gut like that. Look at the tail.
And this is what people believed happened for Margot to get this thing called tail rot, which happens when you neglect proper care of your lizard in ways like nutrition, for example. Also, apparently there were people at literal reptile cons that were calling him out as well, from what it seems like a while ago. So this wasn't something that was just brought up to make fun of him. Obviously, maybe some people are concerned trolling, but I do think there are genuine people that were trying to get him to take care of Margot better, and from what I see, he more brushed it off as hate. Once again, you can say it's concerned trolling, but at the same point, I can understand why people would be sympathetic towards the lizard, especially lizard owners, right? And then on top of that, if it's concern trolling, then why would people at a lizard con privately call it out, you know? Concern trolling definitely exists, but I feel like for at least the people that I showed in this video, I don't think they were concern trolling. I think they genuinely wanted Margot to be taken care of better. Now, another thing that was going around was that Margot had seemed to die at a decently young age at 7 years old, and people point to Roman's bad care of her as the reason she died so prematurely. Since healthy bearded dragons in captivity should have a lifespan of about 10-ish years from what I researched and seen other owners say. Others also question Margot's cause of death, aka the G&T diagnosis that Roman provided, in the sense of asking if this was caused by the bad care Roman had of Margot, or if this was more of an inevitable thing regardless of care. Now, Roman has vehemently denied this and has come to the stance that G&T is more of a genetic trait than Margot got, though I do have a bit of an issue with this take. Okay, hi guys. Hello, this is me, the PNG guy, and I have something to say. This is the TikTok by Roman Hawk here. This is under the name Saber Fatalis, which is their new account because apparently they got their old account banned. There's some things to talk about here, so. Okay, so they start here because people were talking about, like, the reason G&T was in Margot was because of neglect, right? And basically Roman's argument is saying no. And here they posted this screenshot. So right here, you would think a deficiency in the neurofibromin protein potentially due to genetic factors. And so here he puts G&T cancer cause, and he puts it up here. However, if you read the whole thing, it's way more disingenuous. Hold on. So it says G&T, particularly somatostatonemus, I don't know. I feel like I just said a slur, are a type of cancer commonly found in bearded dragons. While the exact cause is unknown, so it says right here, the exact cause is unknown right here. Research suggests that a deficiency in neurofibromin protein potentially due to genetic factors may play a role in the development of these tumors. Right here, this isn't as bulletproof as he's making it out to be because it says right here, the exact cause is unknown. So I went ahead and I looked up, is gastric neuroendocrine blah 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 in bearded dragons genetic, right? And here it says, once again, very similar to the post that Roman had, there is currently no evidence to suggest that GNC in bearded dragons are genetic. These tumors have been increasingly recognized in captive bearded dragons, particularly young animals. The exact cause remains unclear. My thing is, like, if we go down the road of it being genetic, why is it only in captive bearded dragons, for one? Now, I know what everyone's gonna say, oh, you're using Google AI, so just blah, 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 blah. Okay. I then went ahead and I believe I clicked one of the articles that it suggests, right? This is Veterinary Partner, created by veterinarians. This is from a vet's perspective about this whole thing. Just to be clear, here I was looking at it, so it says relatively new and recognized and highly malignant cancer is seen more and more in captive bearded dragons. Once again, if it's genetic, I feel like it would also be seen in wild bearded dragons, but maybe they just didn't do research yet or something. So far, only captive bearded dragons have been found with GNT. It seems to occur most often in young animals. Okay. And here it says, under this section, it says bearded dragons with GNT are usually just sick. They have non-specific signs, or what pets owners sometimes call ain't doing it right. Bearded dragons who aren't hungry and are vomiting should have GNT on the list of possible diseases to rule out. I managed to look through like 3 different articles. I looked through this like Sage journal too, and it's kind of saying a very similar thing. Decrease in functional neurofibromin protein may also be involved in the pathogenesis of these tumors in bearded dragons. Insufficient genetic data did not allow for analysis of potential mutation. And it says further genetic studies are necessary to investigate this pathway. So from everything that I'm looking up and from what I'm seeing, it looks like while it's not out of the realm of possibility that it could be a genetic disease, it's seeming like it's still up in the air, and this hasn't been proven without a shadow of a doubt, like Roman makes it out in his response, providing quote-unquote proof. Another reason people were concerned about Roman not being a little more self-reflective on his care of Margot was because he does still own pets, including bearded dragons. But then he also has claimed to have a cat named Little Man that he mentioned previously, so the concern was if he was treating them better than the treatment of Margot. This also led people questioning about another pet he had owned, a dog that he had previously named Finn, and recalled the time where Finn had actually went and attacked Roman. And this is a post that he had where he said, after the vet yesterday, I caught him on our living room table eating food off the table. I walked over to pop his butt and he latched onto my thumb, causing it to bleed. When my boyfriend heard me cry out, he came out to deal with it, and Finn got his finger ripping skin and causing more bleeding. Now, for some backstory about the dog, they had gotten the Dachshund puppy in October 2021. Though, aside from a couple posts here and there, not much of Finn was shown, especially not as much as Margot or even Guppy, really. Now, because of this, I don't want to come to any rash conclusions about his treatment of him, but what people pointed out is that dogs don't just become aggressive like that out of nowhere, so a lot of people were wondering if Margot wasn't the only one not being taken care of, and if Roman was neglecting them as well, causing them to do things like that. Roman's care of Finn has been taken into question since as far back as 2022 by other pet owners, where it was even featured on a subreddit talking about these initial posts. There's also another post that showed some damage Finn did to their window, in which he got charged because of that. Then Hawk goes on to say in the post, I'm on my last line with this dog. Now, from what I understand, that's kind of the last post that he made about Finn, but his ex-boyfriend then came up with an update later on as to Finn's health, and it's not good. Now, for starters, he revealed that Finn actually had gingivitis, which would definitely imply some sort of neglect or mistreatment from the owner, though I'm not saying this had something to do with Roman or not, because the fact that this dude is asking Reddit for what to do and not taking him to the vet is kind of crazy to me. But I won't speculate too much into it. He also had another more heartbreaking post where he mentions that towards the end of April, he had seen Finn was actually paralyzed with stage IVDD, speculating that it most likely came from him falling down the stairs. He was then told that he had to fork over $15,000 for Finn to get on the path to recovery, but that just wasn't money he had. So he unfortunately had to give him up to a rescue team for him to have a chance of recovery. Now, once again, I'm not blaming Roman completely here, but I do have to ask, out of curiosity, has Roman even cared enough to call or ask about Finn? And if so, is there any way that he contributed to it? Since I have to assume getting Finn was at least partly his idea as well. I do think at the very least, the confirmed behavior that he posted about before definitely warrants some genuine questions here for sure, as pet owners have voiced via comments when they heard about this. And through the comments, I saw one allegation that it said Roman was letting Finn pee in puppy pads all over his apartment instead of taking him outside to pee, though to be clear, I didn't see any evidence to this, so I won't say if this is 100% true or not. Though, if this is true, considering that Roman claims to only work like 1 hour a day, this would be very bad if true, and show some real bad signs of neglect on their part. There was 2 other bearded dragons, so next let's talk about the lizards. One was named Melon, and one was named Lennon. Melon only had lasted a week, and Lennon had lasted about 7 months, and there was an entire story there of people thinking that Margot had actually eaten Lennon.
2 previous lizards. The first lizard, her name was Melon. Tiny little thing. She only lasted a week with me. And what had happened is people wanted to say she got impacted and died or something that I did. No, She arrived with an upper respiratory infection that we had no idea about because she was the size of my pinky. Very, very new baby bearded dragon. She passed of an upper respiratory infection that the breeder didn't know about and that I didn't know about. So she passed in her sleep. So the next bearded dragon, his name was Lennon. He was my first ever male. So feisty. And there was a few videos on my TikTok of him I know people are going to bring up, and people have been posting videos about him. He lasted 6 or 7 months, and the story with him is he was doing great. It was my 18th birthday. I had a friend fly down to come visit me for my 18th birthday, and we were out doing stuff all day, staying out pretty late at night. And I told my mother and my siblings, please watch Lennon and don't let him near Margot. Make sure his tank, the lid of his tank is shut, because he, prior to, had escaped twice. He had escaped out of the enclosure twice from just pushing it up and getting out. So I was like, please make sure, stay in my room, play on my Xbox, just make sure he doesn't get out. So I'm out for my 18th birthday. I come home really late. My mom's yelling at me because I came home an hour late, and I'm sitting on my bed, and I look at Lennon's tank. He's not in there. And I was like, what the f-? Look at Margot's tank. He jumped in there when no one was paying attention. He jumped in there. And
Did she eat him?
She didn't eat him.
Oh, okay,
she
so
crushed his skull.
Damn.
He almost decapitated him.
Wow.
It was very, very gruesome, and it had literally happened right before I got home because the blood was fresh. I couldn't even look at Margot for a week.
Now, there's not much to argue about Melon's story all too much. Whether or not you believe him there is up to you. But Lennon's story is a whole other topic that has had people suspicious. Roman, as he hinted at before, has talked about Lennon's passing beforehand, and the story does seem to line up, minus a few details like him reasonably not telling the person that Lennon's skull was crushed by Margot. Now, others raise some decent questions. Like, for example, if Lennon had escaped out of his cage 2 other times, like Roman claimed, why not put something on top of the tank so he can't escape, especially since you were leaving for a very long time with Lennon unsupervised. Also, people were asking questions of how Lennon was able to open up Margot's tank in the first place, though that one more depends on how the tanks were set up, and I don't want to speculate on that all too much since I don't know what their enclosures looked like at the time of this happening. Either way, Lennon's passing did seem to be avoidable if they just had put something on top of the tank so he wouldn't open it. And like I said before, at the very least, Roman is an irresponsible idiot who didn't think of that option in the first place, and at most, Roman is neglectful and just didn't care to think of solutions too much. But that's depending on how much grace you want to give him. Either way, the nigga's a moron. Now, these incidents would have people then dig a bit further and end up finding stuff about one of the birds belonging to Roman's partner at the time. Now, his ex has previously had birds, at least 2 that we know of is Freddie Mercury and Elton John, due to a TikTok that Roman posted a while ago. Now, there was actually another bird that Roman had bought for him previously, and that is a gala cockatoo named Tuna. In a post on r/parrots, his partner had posted expressing that he wanted to rehome Tuna after having him for a few months. And he mentions that the reason why is because his screeching had affected Roman, which caused him to have panic attacks since he's apparently on the spectrum. Man, you're a furry and on the spectrum? Bro, pick a struggle, man. Now, Roman had commented on this as well in response to someone asking if they've tried noise cancellation before, and he basically said it didn't work. Also, this is proof that this is in fact Roman's ex from before, as he says in the post that he was his partner at the very beginning of the statement. Now, on top of this, he also had to rehome Freddie and Elton, and another unnamed bird that he was rehoming as well. But this one was interesting because it showed the cage that he was in, and from the reaction I saw from other bird owners, this cage seemed way too small. Now, apparently, the reason why all these birds were getting rehomed was because the partner didn't have the funds, which begs the question, why the hell are you buying so many fucking pets if you don't have the means to support them? And I say you guys because Roman, at the very least, was responsible for buying both Tuna and Freddie, since he says it in a post back in 2023 about it. It seems that both these people are irresponsible idiots. And look, I understand that they're young, but that's not nearly enough of an excuse, as it's not fair to the animals that have to be the ones to suffer through this. Also, and I think that this is something that's important to talk about, but Roman had actually cheekily mentioned in a TikTok how he impulse buys pets to cope with stress. And that is a terrible trait to have, just to be absolutely clear. It's one thing to buy taxidermy and fursuits, but pets are an entirely different story. They're not just toys that you could just buy to cope with your issues. And especially coming from people who have owned pets for a while, this is super irresponsible and negligent at best, and honestly, I have to say it, abusive at worst. And it seems like there's a pattern of behavior here, especially with pets that aren't reptiles, where they can't learn how to ever take better care of their pets. And to me, these kinds of people should not own so many pets at one time and should either stick with one, maybe two, or just not own pets at all, especially if you're not willing to put in the work and not take care of them. All of this info and all of this stuff had people basically label Roman as an abuser and was saying that he abused Margot until the very end. With all this coming to light and people questioning what the hell was going on with the GoFundMe and then Margot's health, Hawk had actually put out a 6-minute response where he was addressing criticisms with the fundraiser and how expensive it is. So one thing that Roman actually brings up is this picture that was going around about how much money he was making off of his TikTok and corn growing business that we had brought up before, though this was more like an AI chat GBT answer, and it said that he earned between $800,000 and $3.5 million a year. Now, I personally didn't go over this because measuring net worth is usually way off in terms of figuring out how much a content creator makes, so I kind of just assumed that was wrong. Now, that's fine because it was probably wrong, and I think Roman should address that. Then he said that there is no way in hell I could make anywhere to $1 million a year or more, which is interesting because as we've established, he has. So I don't know, that was just kind of weird to me. I don't know why he said that. Now, with the taxidermy and fursuits, he mentions how he's basically over a long period of time has been selling his stuff to get more money, something that we've already talked about. Now, that's completely fine and all, and once again, it's good to clear up that misunderstanding, but my issue is that with how expensive fursuits are, and he 100% has more than one fursuit, my question would be like, why not just sell all those other fursuits that you have and not ask other people to pay for the taxidermy and whatnot? Like, I just don't understand. Another thing that he said is that no one is forcing you to donate to a GoFundMe.
On that topic, no one's forcing you to donate to a GoFundMe that is based off free will. No one is forcing you to drop $5, $10, $15, $50, $100. No one's forcing you to do anything. As I have said, money is tight, but for some reason people want to tell me I'm financially fine. Why would I ask for help if I'm fine?
Which I really don't like that argument, because let's be honest, he even says in the GoFundMe itself that Margot was precious to these people. So obviously there's a level of investment that you're using for giving people a reason to give you money. Saying that no one is forcing you to donate, in my opinion, is usually pretending like they don't know what they're doing with the language that they're presenting in the GoFundMe, if that makes any sense. I know it's a very cynical way of looking at it. I completely understand that, but that's basically what's going on here. Margot was important to a lot of people, so obviously a lot of people are going to feel inclined to put money towards Margot's taxidermy. After this, he then says something very similar to a post that he made on Instagram, which I'll get into now, and that's kind of the future of where he's going to go from there. I am moving back home to Alabama to be near my family, just me. I'll be bringing Guppy and our little cat Little Man, but sadly my partner isn't coming. We'll still be together, just long distance. I need a complete mental restart and to surround myself with more positive things and better job opportunities. I'm trying to save every penny I have, but I will be tight or might not have enough. Now this, I'm not going to hold you guys, I'm in complete support of. I'll be honest, I don't think he should be on the internet at all, especially at this point in time, because very clearly the internet was getting to him, but it is a good start to do a reboot of things and maybe get a less taxing job, which he actually enjoys. Anyways, enough of the sappy shit. Let's continue on. So then throughout the 6-minute response, he continues to whine and moan about him constantly having to get rid of his stuff in order to make rent, like his taxidermy and many of his fursuits. Which one, if you have to do all of that to make do, why don't you just get a job? Especially since self-admittedly, you say you work 1 hour a day of selling corn.
I work in my house by myself in a room for an hour a day.
Another thing I wanted to point out was they put out a TikTok a while ago that said, "My money, my choice," or something along those lines. Like, don't worry, it's my money. I do whatever I want with it, my choice. That has to mean people were warning him and he didn't heed the warnings. Why would I feel bad for you, especially feel so bad for you that I now trying to be convinced to donate to you when you have clearly shown that you are terrible with money?
I have been trying to save money for months and months and months, and I've been selling shit left and right. I don't even own 80% of the things I used to own about a year ago. I have been getting rid of things. I have been selling taxidermy. I have been selling my belongings. I have been working my ass off. But because my rent in this apartment's so high and my bills are so high, and I'm the only one who pays for everything, it is taking a financial toll on me. It's not anyone's fucking business, but clearly now it has to be someone's business because everybody just wants to say, I have money, when in reality, I don't.
Yeah, you should have planned income accordingly. The crazy part is, to me, is that he lives in one of the most expensive areas to live, like, ever. Like, literally, that's what New York is known for. New York is known for you having to sell a kidney on the black market in order to pay for a piece of pizza. But you didn't prepare for that at all? If not, why? Why didn't y'all talk about it before? Like, what's going on? It's one of two things, and this is usually what I say in these kinds of situations. It's either you are a drooling troglodyte who cannot live on their own, or you're malicious and you're lying. Either way, it's not good, like, whatsoever. And, like, I'm sorry, but, like, this screams to me. The other thing I was gonna say is, while I understand it's like, I'm gonna do what I want to do with her. Okay, that's fine. That's fine and dandy.
With all that being said, the insensitive comments of just bury her, put her in a shoebox. No, I'm sorry, no. I'm moving. I do not have a backyard. I do not have a front yard. Her body will not survive the move. I'm doing what I want to do with her. It's no one else's choice but mine.
Why can't you just get her cremated and put her in an urn? I understand you want to taxidermy her, but the issue is you don't have money. If you don't financially have money to do that, then you can't do that. I'm sorry. Like, at that point, like, she's not going to survive the move. Well, then when you get to your house, then bury her in a yard or something along those lines. You're just going to have to do it that way. Sometimes you got to just flush the goldfish down the toilet. Sometimes you don't have money to put on an entire funeral. And if you actually just do not have the money, you're just constantly selling stuff left and right and barely make do with what you have, which I don't believe, by the way. Sometimes you just have to accept that and work with the resources you have. And if the resource you have is going to a Dollar Tree and putting her in a flower pot, and that's what comments were trying to tell him this whole time, with some unneeded disrespect, I would say, but the point is still there.
But once again, I see everything. I see every comment that's made. I see every post that's made about me. I see everything that's said about me. And I have just watched disrespect after harassment, after boundaries crossed, ever since she has passed.
This person is trying to figure out like more solutions, being like, okay, maybe you can break down her body or something and then put her in like a pot or something along those lines. I don't see what's wrong with that. I don't see what's wrong with trying to come up with different solutions other than spending $4,000 to get her cremated. Like, he's acting like this is like a bad post. This is an example of someone putting a bad post, but in all honesty, like, if you actually read the comment, the only part of it that you can say is like disrespectful is when this person says, then that's low-key and it's you who should have planned income accordingly. But like, while it is harsh, I mean, it is correct. No, you obviously are not good with handling your money. You probably honestly need like a caretaker or something to like put your money in a vault or whatever. You need other people to help you with your money.
But for some reason, people want to tell me I'm financially fine. Why would I ask for help if I'm fine? Why would I do that? If I was fine and was able to do any of this on my own, I wouldn't have posted anything. But instead, you want to come to the internet and say I'm begging for money and trying to profit off of my daughter's death. It's fucking sick. It's really sick.
The other thing that I wanted to say about this point is I think it's super interesting that you want to have your cake and eat it too. So you want to put out a very vague GoFundMe where people don't know where their money is really going. People don't know what you're spending the $4,000 on. People are questioning left and right, hey, what is this money being spent on? You refuse to acknowledge it until much later, and you are mad because people are speculating into you constantly bragging about how you've gotten a shitload of money, so much so that you moved to New York and that you're completely fine. How stupid do you think people are? Yes, obviously people are going to speculate when your GoFundMe description is terrible. You give no kind of information about where the money is going. People just know that you want to taxidermify your lizard, but that has been revealed that does not cost much. Where are you spending the money? And now if you do this, you're a terrible person. People are sick because they are wanting to speculate as to where their money is going. That makes someone sick now? That's so weird. That sounds like you're trying to guilt trip people when you put it like this, and you're like blaming other people because you don't know how to communicate. In my opinion, that's that's wild to me, that you're putting this on other people and not reflecting on how badly of a job that you did giving the description of what people are spending their money on. I think that's ridiculous, frankly. So overall, I think this was a kind of bad response that seemed to really deflect blame on other parties rather than him taking accountability for how poorly his language was in his GoFundMe that omitted a lot of information that I think is necessary for people to have in order to trust you. So after all of that, Roman releases one final response that I don't think people have seen at all, at least from what I've researched, mostly because this was on his alternate Instagram account. Now, it comes in the form of 3 notes. So he starts off finally giving an explanation about where all the funds are finally going, the basic services that's needed, apparently this thing called a necrosis autopsy and testing of tumors that Margot may have had and whatnot. And then he clears up the rumor of the cremation and whatnot costing very little compared to what he was asking. And of course, just cremation and bone cleaning don't cost $4,000. It's everything that involves the process from finding out what happened, getting the supplies to get her to and from, and services altogether. No one ever said it was just cremation. Now, I find that very, very interesting. Going back to the GoFundMe, in the 3rd paragraph, it says this: "Unfortunately, I do not have the funds to even get her cremated currently, so I could use all the support I could get in this devastating time." So once again, it's like, were you kind of over exaggerating in the fundraiser, or are you lying here? Which it's, once again, I don't know. We'll kind of get into the last part of his statement later. So once again, this is great and all, but in my personal opinion, I kind of do have to ask, why was this not all put in the original GoFundMe description as to where the money is going? Why not be completely transparent with your audience about what you're using the money for and be so vague in the original GoFundMe? Because while yes, he is correct, he did not say that he was going to use all the money on the cremation and whatnot. He also didn't mention paying for an autopsy or any of this at all. So once again, I ask, why not just stop the victim complex and understand that your bad language is what caused confusion in the first place? And clearly there was confusion because everyone here had the narrative that you are spending it all on cremation, and people think that that's why this whole thing is a scam in the first place. Also, I just feel like for someone that doesn't have a lot of money to really spend and is pinching pennies, I feel like a lot of this stuff is just so unnecessary. Why do you need a necrosis autopsy if you already know that Margot passed away because of GNT? Another question is, why is there the need for a plaque? If you don't have the money to do all this stuff, I think you should just get the cremation and the custom urn alongside shipping costs and keep it like that. In my opinion, I just feel like you could easily cut down costs by making sacrifices. And in this situation, I think it would have been better to just accept the fact that these are all things that you want and not need. There's so much unnecessary fluff with this, and this could have easily been under $1,000 if he really wanted to. So as for the aftermath of all of this happening, Roman had decided to fully deactivate his TikTok. This is goodbye for now. No, I am not leaving, but I have better things to focus on than death threats across every platform I am on, including his corn growing business and my own email. All I'm focusing on is getting Margot shipped out, moving across the country, being with my mother, getting a new job, and waiting for Margot to come home. I'm not focused on the sick and twisted people making lies. I am focused on the future. Now, from what I understand, he is still posting stuff on his corn growing Twitter account, which I definitely will not be showing for various obvious reasons. A lot of people are criticizing him for the odd move after what he considers his quote-unquote precious daughter tragically dying, and his move is like slinging poon on a Twitter timeline. Another thing from what I saw is that he had another Twitter account that he deleted for whatever reason, and he's also fully privated his personal Instagram account. And honestly, this should have been a sign for Roman to leave the internet and get his life together, as he said multiple times at this point. But I think Roman instead wanted to have a redemption arc of some kind and saw his opportunity when he got a DM from Papa Gut to have an interview with him. Now, the interview with Papa Gut took place on July 15th, 2025, and overall it was a very productive interview with Roman that did good with just having a genuine conversation with him, while also balancing it out with giving him a chance to explain himself on his multiple controversies and multiple allegations that people are levying towards him. And overall, it was received well, with comments sympathizing with Roman. Sadly though, this did not last very long. Now, from what I understand, this started with the deletion of one of their Instagram accounts due to people mass reporting it for the corn growing he did there. I didn't know people hated farmers this much. He then created his new account, Saber Fatalis, and this recent update seemed to have reignited people enough to talking about of Roman's actions that we've talked about already, mainly the GoFundMe and Roman not being a good pet owner. Some were even calling him an animal abuser. So, to retaliate, he started off by doing another series of explanations regarding Margot and what had happened. Now, this story on his Instagram was meant to be a takedown of a post that he labeled as false information about him. Once again, I'm not going to go through every single thing that he said. I'm only going to tackle the most important ones. Now, in the first picture, I think the biggest takeaway is he talks about the money and how rich he was and how he was flaunting money towards people that were calling him broke and saying that the adult content he was doing wasn't a real job. Basically, he retaliates on this, saying that the money was spent over a 5-year period, not a 3-year one, and it went towards other outside factors besides fursuits, like pet surgeries, his physical therapy that he needed due to being wheelchair bound, and paying for things with his mom. Now, that's fine and great and all, but that's acting like you still don't make money now off of it, and it's not a good revenue source anymore, which, from what I understand, you very much are making more than enough to support yourself and get what you needed for Margot without making the GoFundMe in the first place. Also, just to be absolutely clear, him spending $1.3 million in 5 years is still really bad. That's still around $260,000 that he is spending every single year. And also, things like the surgery and the physical therapy, I'm guessing is a one-time thing. So, either way, Roman Hawks still needs a caretaker, and I stand by that. The next screenshot, what's most important to me was him going at people who were mentioning his couches that he had put in Margot's tank. Basically saying, quote unquote, people are losing their mind over the couches. And honestly, I think that's a very weird statement to me, because I feel like that's downplaying how important it is not to have that in there at all. Despite you being a reptile owner your whole life and being around other reptile owners that have given you advice that you have ignored. Regardless, then he says this. Also complaining about the tank liner, the mat. But like I said, it was for cleaning purposes, as both Guppy and Marco have a past of trying to eat substrate before leading to possible impaction. If they would have died from impaction, that would have been blamed on me rightfully, but I removed substrate so that wouldn't happen. Might I also add that the money I make from growing corn goes directly into my rent, bills, laundry, pet food, groceries, and other necessities? Like, do some people not realize adults have to spend their money to live? And all my friends can attest that I have sold 80% of the fursuits I used to own. I have Atlas, Rocco, Jackie, and the new fursuit, Cataclysm. Every single other suit has been sold and is no longer in my possession. Okay, so on one hand, you can't afford anything and you don't have money and you're poor, but on the other hand, you literally talk about how you bought a new fursuit recently. Sell your costumes! Sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and if that includes selling your fucking costumes, then you have to sell them. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Now, in the next picture, he addresses everyone talking about Margot's weight and whatnot, which we've gone over already, so I want to mainly focus on where he mentions the GoFundMe and how he, quote unquote, never said it was just for cremation. Once again, while technically yes, you never said in the GoFundMe that it was just for cremation, your description of what the money was going to is non-existent. How can you blame people for not understanding a breakdown that you didn't provide? I'm sorry, but there is no budging in this specific case with the GoFundMe. You just have to accept and take accountability that you did a terrible job letting people know what you need $4,000 for until the third response on your Instagram that people don't know about. That is completely on you, and I do not feel bad for you in the slightest that people are taking your GoFundMe out of context and assuming the worst. I think overall, you have to acknowledge that the GoFundMe was worded terribly and that's no one's fault but your own. You wrote it, you take accountability for it. Now, in this next thing he talks about, I think this mentions a very valid point where he talks about the language of how he handled things and focuses in on when he said if someone was happier if Margot was in a freezer forever, where the original poster said that that was manipulative. It was a statement that came from the feeling of disrespect. I did not want her to stay in my freezer until I moved, as she was such a huge part of my life outside of social media that I wanted to memorialize her and give her the best afterlife that I could. So again, sorry if it sounded guilt trippy, but it came from a place of hurt and grief. And I think that's completely fair, especially with someone that lost a pet that they've owned for that long in their life. I think it's completely fine for him to react the way he did. But once again, I also can't blame others for wanting to question things about your GoFundMe that you barely explained. But just to be clear, I am more sympathetic towards Roman in this aspect because I have to imagine the emotions are very high. And I don't want to sit there and act like Roman is a robot and that he didn't care for Margot at all. So I'm pretty much with him on this point. Now, he also mentions him getting away from social media. He mentions how there was no attempt to escape accountability and only privated his socials due to the harassment he was getting, which I will say I do not condone in the slightest, even though Roman in a way should also self-reflect about the way that he originally took to death threats. Instead of leaving the internet for a little bit, fan the flames by responding publicly to a death threat saying that someone's mom should die or something along those lines. Now, also, to be clear, from my understanding and from what I've seen, he actually had never privated the Muzzlemutt Twitter account, but I also get that the account is for making money and promoting, so I won't go too hard into that. Then he shows from what I assume to be Margot taxidermied, at least that's what I think it is, and then shows a post responding to people that said that he killed Margot, which I also think is a crazy thing to say, and I think that's kind of over the line, and then mentions a cancer being genetic, which I've already talked about. Now, the last post he put up has a breakdown of his rent, which according to him reaches $6,000 a month, which he claims is his entire income, and then reveals that his partner doesn't have a job the entire time that they lived together and everything came out of his income. So one, no offense, but your partner sounds like a fucking bum. But two, and I'm sorry, but I just don't believe that $6K is your entire income, especially with the tweet of you bragging about your state of living that we've already talked about, on top of you being able to gain a lot of money through selling molds of your genitals. What I also found suspicious, he never addressed that tweet at all, which makes me more suspicious about what the heck is going on there. He then posted that video that I already talked about earlier, but let's talk about the other part of the video. Now, the other thing in this TikTok that you can see here is proof of the expenses going exactly where I said they were going. Kind of wish this wasn't so blurry and whatnot, but you know, fair enough. This is the rundown of all the expenses that I should have already gone over at this point. And then here we see 1 hour long interview, literally providing evidence and backstory to everything. So once again, this is a little disingenuous because while it does present backstory, I watched the interview. It was a good interview. This providing evidence part is just literally not true. I watched the entire interview and he never once pulled out any documents or anything like that in the interview. He was just talking. Once again, he did talk about his previous lizards that people were saying that he killed or whatever, but it's just testimony. A testimony is not really evidence, you know what I mean? Saying that you're providing evidence in this interview, in my opinion, it's just wrong. Like, I don't think there was any evidence provided in the actual interview with Papa Gut. They were just having a conversation. So once again, saying this is a little disingenuous in my opinion. I just feel like Roman Hawk is like a moron. Now, this last portion was showcasing proof showing that at the very least he is using the payments for Margot and not for another fursuit. But I think my points that I had earlier talking about how there's a lot that is not needed and is inflating the price still stand. Also, and this might just be me, but this is all so incredibly vague and Roman doesn't bother explaining what any of this is going towards, which in my opinion is a problem because it feels like you're being so cryptic with people that gave you money and trusted you, and I find that very strange. For example, he has a bunch of prices that he put and grouped into one thing, but doesn't specify what those specifically are going towards. You have to just guess based on the prices that he got, and even one of the prices doesn't line up with anything that he said the money was going towards. Like, I can tell that one part is for the autopsy when cross-referencing that with the rundown, but why do I have to do all that when you can just say what this is for? Just be transparent, man. And then he proceeded to write a lengthy post crashing out yet again on people for thinking that he's a liar. Now, I'm not covering all of this because it's just tackling old ground, but there is one part that was strange to me, and that's in the last paragraph. Margot lived in a 4x2x2 enclosure with perfect heating and UVB and climbing ranges she was able to reach. Bearded dragons climb by nature. Yeah, the majority, but if anyone knew Margot, she never liked it. She liked low places. She liked to walk around, hide, and nuzzle under things / people, and she was happy. And this is most likely referencing the one TikTok from Dog Bites that once again we've shown before. So I'm so sorry, and this is gonna sound kind of insensitive. This sounds like some cope. This sounds like complete copium to me. But who knows? Maybe Margot is one of the few bearded dragons in the entire world that doesn't need to climb high places at all, and didn't just adapt to not having the ability to climb anywhere because you didn't provide any. But maybe that's the case. I don't know the lizard. Maybe he's right. I don't know. But I'll let you guys kind of decide where you stand on that. And then then he says, hate me, I don't care anymore. To be clear, while there probably are people that do want to just hate him because they want to see him lose it, and this is them jumping on like a hate brigade, at the same exact time, others were calling you out on Margot's health a very long time ago, and you were being an ass about it. People talked about how you were blowing your money irresponsible, and your response was flaunting your money out there and saying it's not their problem and being an ass about it. The response you had to people multiple times was unhinged as hell, which you even acknowledged was not a good look and made you look like an ass. You put out that energy into the world and then beg like a homeless person to pay for your lizard that they said you don't take good care of and have given you warnings about previously. Consequences come back at you. Maybe just stop being an asshole. Maybe that'll work for you. Like, I don't know. And hopefully this is the last time we see this dude until he gets his life together and moves out. On July 26th, I will be moving from New York City all the way back to Alabama to be with my family. I've gotten my own small home/apartment and will be restarting my life. I will be seeking therapy, getting medicated for my mental disorders, going to the gym to help lose weight, getting a second job, and all around building myself back up from the depressed and lazy person NYC has turned me into. I'm very excited for the change. And for now, Roman's story ends there. So overall, what is the conclusion here? Well, for starters, I want to say that Roman isn't the worst person that I've covered, though that really isn't the greatest accomplishment. However, there is a lot to him that you can definitely lay out as red flags, especially when it comes to his pet ownership. And I do want to lay out my overall final opinion and kind of sort my thoughts through. Personally, I think there's been more than enough times of him not being completely honest and him making various situations, especially this one recently with Margot, and he does not handle hate on the internet well whatsoever. From all the way back when he was crying about how people were making fun of him for growing corn, to him crashing out in a furry outfit about having assumptions about him that have been laid out well before that. He does not handle any of this stuff right whatsoever, and for a content creator to not handle stuff like that, I just don't think he should do it. Now, going into specifics, do I think he was solely responsible for Margot's death? I don't want to definitively say yes, because while the nuance that Roman provides isn't substantial enough for me personally, I do still think there is nuance into it. But things like him being really young when he initially got Margot, alongside him accepting accountability that he didn't take care of Margot well at all. And I wouldn't put the possibility completely down that there maybe were factors outside of his control. However, I also have to admit that in my personal opinion, I think he very much downplays how much of an effect his admittedly bad care of Margot previously had on her in the long run, which is important to acknowledge since he has Guppy to take care of, he has a cat to take care of, and I think he probably has other pets as well that he doesn't let the internet know about. And to acknowledge your mistakes as a pet owner is how you improve in the first place. I have no idea why he constantly just blames the GNT thing as to why Margot passed away, but either way, I can tell there's a lot of copium that goes on in his head to kind of justify his, I'll say, less than stellar way that he took care of Margot. As for him being an animal abuser, I don't think that necessarily. However, I will say there's a lot of characteristics to where if someone calls him an animal abuser, I wouldn't fight back on it. Because in the past, he is shown to be grossly negligent with his pets, which is why I brought up certain pets like Finn and Tuna, because they really show that he really throws caution to the wind when it comes to making sure that the pets fit his lifestyle by doing very, very simple research on the type of animals that he's getting. You could even make the argument that he is very neglectful around his pets. However, I wouldn't go that far personally. However, there is signs towards that being the reality. I think that this dude owning pets, especially with how often he gets them, should not be a thing, and I personally think is very, very selfish. It's very clear through certain TikToks that Roman is incredibly impulsive with many things in his life, from the shitty piercings to the taxidermy, and from what I see, it's gone to the pets as well. And that needs to be worked on. And this comes alongside him being an irresponsible moron despite being around animals for so long. Once again, I will never condone harassment or death threats or something, and if he's getting death threats, then those people are lunatics, for sure, 1000%. I completely understand them privating because even on TikTok, people were just going at him a lot, so I can understand that getting to him. Get off the internet, motherfucker. Get off the internet. Stop responding to these people. In my personal opinion on Roman's future on the internet is that I feel like Roman should probably not do the internet full time. Also, get off the site where you're slinging poon on the timeline, since it's apparently not making him enough money. Despite that, he does it anyway. It's very interesting. However, I wouldn't say he has to give up TikTok completely, but maybe funnel that audience through a different endeavor. For example, taking up tattoo artistry or something, since that's more long term and better in the long run, and he's already shown that he does have a passion for art and has even done tattoos before. I do hope that they get their life back on track. But anyways, that's gonna be it for me. I'll catch you guys later. I am sorry this video was so long. This was supposed to just be like a 20-minute Twitter video, and it's turned into a damn like documentary or something. I will catch you guys in the next installment of talking about topics for entirely too long. Goodbye.